The Trump administration is getting very, very close to starting to just openly defy these judges. We got these judges trying to rule from the bench, trying to rule like little kings and queens. They're overturning Supreme Court rulings that have just happened days earlier. We got a lot to talk about, and we got some pretty serious dangers ahead. If the Trump administration starts to just realize that they cannot keep abiding by all of these little petulant dictators, that is going to set us up for a major constitutional crisis like we haven't seen for in generations. We're going to talk about some of these court orders that the Trump administration is starting to ignore. We're going to talk about these 200 that are supposed to be reported, right? Deported, reported. We're going to talk about Garcia, who has been ordered for the Trump administration to go down to El Salvador, get him and bring him back. We're going to talk about the AP News, that the federal courts had time to rule on where the AP News photographers can go in the White House. We got that, and in each of these cases, we're seeing the Trump administration either openly defying, ignoring, or pushing back pretty seriously in some ways. These are some big steps. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade. And these are the things the mainstream media is either downplaying or ignoring. But they're definitely not ignoring the fact that the Trump administration is apparently about to be held in contempt by a judge. Judge James Boasberg, a federal court judge, he ordered that the U.S. government reassert custody. It's all interesting, like what in the world do you even mean by that? Of over 200 El Salvadorians who were deported to El Salvador and are now in prisons in El Salvador. They're not in U.S. custody, so reassert custody. What does that mean? Navy SEAL teams have to go down there and start grabbing people out of the prisons and do like a prison break, but like back into our prisons? It's an interesting question. And it's even more interesting because his ruling for the United States to go reassert custody of these 200 Salvadorians and then bring them back to the United States, the Trump administration is like, we can't do that. Like, what do you mean, do that? Like, they're not in our custody. Like, how are we supposed to get them into our custody? So the Trump administration hasn't done anything, and instead they appealed the case. It went up to the appeals court, and the appeals court ruled, yes, you have to go get these people and bring them back to the United States by 2-1 in the appeals court. And then it went to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that no, you do not have to bring them back. So the Trump administration going, phew, okay, sanity has prevailed eventually that we don't take people who have no right or reason to be in the United States. We don't have to go outside the country and go find them and bring them illegally to the United States. It's a whole mess. So the Supreme Court ruled this way, but did that stop Judge James Boasberg? No, that did not. He has ruled that there is good cause that the Trump administration is in contempt of his March 15th emergency order. Willful disregard. Wait, they appealed this. And then they appealed it to the Supreme Court. And it got overruled. So it should be good. But no. This judge is like, well, that Supreme Court ruling didn't quite apply to exactly what I had ordered, and so therefore my order still stands. Even though the case was overruled, his emergency order, he thinks, still stands, which is insane. You You'd have to be a leftist from one of these Harvard Ivy League schools to understand what insanity this is about. But he has given the Trump administration 7 days to come into compliance, or else he's going to hold the Trump administration officials in contempt. And quite frankly, I think that would just be stating the obvious, because the Trump administration obviously is holding this judge in contempt. They absolutely contempt him, okay? Because this is him sticking a crown on his head and ruling on everything, and whatever he says becomes law. It's like the law of the Medes and Persians. You know, we have, what's his face? The socialist, Bernie Sanders, running around with AOC, talking about, we're being ruled by an oligarchy. Yeah, we are. They're called the judges. Now, the Supreme Court has realized that these judges actively sabotaging the Trump administration could very well backfire. And that's where we're going to right now. It looks like the Trump administration is going to just look at this Judge James Boasberg and just say, what are you going to do about it? Because at the end of the day, the judges don't have an army. The President of the United States does have an army, multiple armies. He's got the FBI. I mean, heck, even the IRS has an army, right? The President of the United States has a whole bunch of armies. The judges, the federal judges, they don't have an army. So at the end of the day, how do they actually enforce these things? They hope that the actual army of the United States, which reports to their commander-in-chief, the President of the United States, they hope that that army sides with them. But historically speaking, that's not going to happen. That's really not going to happen unless, like, everyone in the United States is absolutely on that judge's side, and most of the administration people are on the judge's side. Without that, the army is going to go, well, I just got this order, so I need to go do this order. Because that's what troops do. That's what troops are trained to do. And as much as you guys, some of you guys are going to be like, well, they swore this oath to uphold the Constitution and not to... No American soldier, I don't believe, double check me on this one. Let me know if there is actually an instance of this. I don't believe any American soldier has ever been charged with a crime for having followed orders. But lots and lots of them have been charged with crimes for disobeying orders, even when they were right to refuse those orders. So, as a soldier, what does that teach you? In fact, pretty much basically all of the training is you don't think. You just do what you're told to do. Officers are supposed to think a little bit, but they get heavily penalized when they think a little too much, right? You're supposed to think within the parameters. Your superior gives you the parameters and you make a decision. And if you think that the parameters aren't going to work, you ask your superior to expand the parameters. And that's acceptable, to explain to your superior why the parameters need to be expanded. But you need to stay within the box. You need to color within the lines. And if you don't, bad things happen to you. So when it comes to the president has an army, multiple armies, who will do what they're told to do, generally speaking. This judge? No. And that's not the only judge out there issuing wacky orders. Consider for a moment that the court ordered the Trump administration, because the Trump administration renamed the water body to the south of the United States to Gulf of America, which is a interesting thing to do. I'm like, why are you wasting your time doing that? But then it came out that part of this is to get around some legislation that the Biden administration wrote up with the term Gulf of Mexico in it. And if you want to reopen that drilling by renaming it to Gulf of America, it actually kind of gets around some of those things in legal terms. Anyway, the AP refused to call it the Gulf of America. Absolutely refused. I believe they still refused to call it Gulf of America. So President Trump's like, okay, fine, then you're not in like the inner circle anymore. Like, we can only bring in is like 10 representatives from different news agencies to come into the Oval Office for like executive order signings and stuff like that. So you can only get so many people in the Oval Office. It's not that big. Well, the AP has long been one of those organizations that's basically guaranteed a slot in that, because they take the pictures and then they sell those pictures to other news agencies, which is a whole thing. Anyway, they believe that they have a right to be in those small gatherings. Well, they ran to a district court judge and got the district court judge to rule that the Trump administration has to let the AP into these small gatherings and has to boot somebody else. Now, whether you think that's right, whether you think that's wrong, I'm going to just frame this a different way. Within a month, less than a month, the AP was able to get a district court judge to rule an emergency motion to alleviate them of the pain of not being in the right room. They're still allowed in the press briefing room of the White House during signings of documents. Within a month. Now let's compare that to the fact that over 100 people who were arrested for the protests at the Capitol in 2021. Okay? 2021. Over 100 of these protesters that have been arrested, we're going to have trials in 2025 this year. They've been pardoned. Many of them have been in prison for 4 years. They've been in solitary confinement. They've been abused. They have been, for 4 years, they've been locked up. Now, some of them have been in only for 3 years or something like that because they got arrested a year later or something like that. But 4 years from the event, they still haven't gotten a trial. But somehow, a district court judge is like, hey, I have nothing better to do. I'm going to rule for the AP being able to go into the Oval Office. You see a little bit of a disconnect there? Emergency order, move heaven and earth. A journalist can't be in the room that they want to be in. Heaven forbid. But you can deprive over 100 normal or ordinary citizens of 4 years of their life, holding them in conditions that are awful, and many of the reports that are coming out are truly tragic and infuriating. You can deprive them for 4 years of their life without a second thought. But, oh no, a journalist. You see what I'm saying here? Absolutely ridiculous. We have this case specifically, not just of the 200 El Salvadorians that were deported under the Alien Enemies Act, but we also have this Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has drawn specific attention from the media, because the media are like the princes of our country. The judges are the kings of our country. They ordered that this dude, this Maryland dad, as they're calling him, who is a ranking official member of MS-13, a high-ranking member who had killed people in order to get in that position. So this lady, she's got Paula Zinnis. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't really care. Xinis. This federal judge, Obama appointed, of course, thought that the Department of Justice and the White House were shaking in their boots because of her order. Instead, the plaintiffs, the federal government, moved in an appeal in 3 ways. An order superintending and micromanaging the defendant's foreign relations with independent sovereign nation of El Salvador. You're meddling with our executive powers. You can't do that. Second criticism of this, an order allowing the expedited discovery and converting Tuesday's hearing into an evidentiary hearing. So basically, she just cheated. She cheated on how the process is supposed to work in order to make things go out the way that they want it to. And that they did that in order to show cause why the defendant should be held in contempt. All right, so the White House goes through the official channels, but then they have some interesting things to say. The relief sought by plaintiffs is inconsistent with the Supreme Court's instruction requiring this court to respect the president's Article 2 authority. So the Supreme Court had already reviewed this and said, okay, you're allowed to say stuff, but you can't meddle in the executive branch's authority to interact with other countries. That's in the Constitution. You can't do that. That's their do that. And then she ordered the president to give daily status reports on getting this guy back. So they basically said, we object to the requirement of daily status reports and reserve the right to challenge that requirement further. But and then later on said basically that that we'll do them as long as we want to do them. But it gets, let's just say it gets a little spicier here. Defendants understand facilitate to mean what that term has long meant in the immigration context, namely actions allowing the alien to enter the United States. So he's in a prison in El Salvador, so facilitate, according to her order, the Trump administration's like, well, okay, well, we'll let him in if he gets to the United States. They asked this court to order defendants to make demands of the El Salvadorian government, that's not right, dispatch personnel onto the soil of an independent sovereign nation, and send an aircraft into the airspace of a sovereign foreign nation to extract a citizen of that nation from its custody. All of those requested orders involve interactions with a foreign sovereign, potential violations of that sovereignty. As in, what if they say no? Then are we compelled to send troops in without their permission? Well, we had the El Salvadorian president in the White House, and he was asked point blank about him. And you know what he said? He said, no, we're not going to release him. And Trump went, that's what he said, kind of like. So that's just another example of the Trump administration, which is appealing these rulings upwards in the court system, but at the same time starting to just say, no, we're just not going to do that. We can't do that. We're not obligated to do that. No, we're not going to do that. And that's the way things need to start going. But it's going to have some serious implications if he starts openly defying these courts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar, The Poplar Report, out.